Alright guys, apologies. This is going to be a part 2 video. With part 1, I had some issues with insurance I was on the phone with, which is why the video abruptly stopped. So, let's continue, okay? Fast forward, we have a scale for leadership that we can actually measure the successfulness of the quality of leadership. What this scale does is it takes a look at training and instruction, so behaviors that improve the athlete or team's performance through skill development. We have democratic behavior, the extent to which the coach allows the athlete autonomy. So, how much freedom does the athlete get in decision making? We have autocratic behavior, and I wrote a little thing that hopefully will be easier for you guys to remember. For autocratic, think authoritarian, where the coach takes up most of the control, or decides how much decision making they have. So, in the leadership style of the coach, if they are looking at democratic behavior, they're looking at how much freedom they'll give the athlete to make the decision. And if they're looking at how much they want to make the decision or how many choices they will take control of, that is governing autocratic behavior. Then we have social support, which should be fairly obvious to you guys, right? The extent to which the needs of the athlete is voiced, and it's not based on performance. So, providing that positive encouragement, whether they succeed or fail, being there for them. And then that kind of ties also into positive feedback. So, this coach expresses appreciation for the athlete's performance and contribution. Oh, I guess also with this video, I did not tell you guys that Clark is here. So, and actually, you can see Troy. The whole family's here. So, hopefully, this isn't too distracting for everyone. Moving on. Let's get to okay. So, research on athlete characteristics. Skleisman, Bytel, and Diacensi, I probably butchered these, argued that the sexes are subject. Make sure, yeah, are subject to gender role stereotypes. Therefore, the approach to leadership for each sex should differ in preference. They found males like training and instruction, more autocratic behavior, so more authoritarian, where the coach just tells them what to do, and positive feedback. The dog is Troy. Troy, go. Scratching his ear. Apologies. Females were found to prefer more democratic behavior, where they had more freedom of choice, as well as social support. What I want from you guys is we're going to take a second and think about this for a moment. Based on you as an individual, what leadership preference do you prefer? Does it line up with this study from 1994's findings? So based on your, let's see if I can back up, pretty please. Based on your sex, do you identify more training and instruction, democratic behavior, autocratic, social support, and positive feedback? Moving into relationship between leadership behaviors and outcomes. Taking the biggest question here is we know the leadership affects outcomes in sport. We know it also affects outcomes in the business related field, relationships, but how so? Like, what is the mechanisms of that? All these different studies basically found that these different dimensions of LSS were positively related to performance outcomes in athletes. So, based on what the athlete wanted from the coach, of those 5, meant there was a higher success rate. There was a greater win-to-loss ratio. They saw improvement in communication and overall athlete satisfaction. It doesn't mean there had to be all 5 there, because we're also talking about the individual athlete, like, right? Just like when I wanted you guys to think a second ago about which dimension do you fall into? Which one do you like the best? We have what the coach thinks is best, what the athlete likes, and then what is best for the scenario. But when using the right dimension for the scenario, it seems all studies found positive outcomes, which is great. Moving on to chapter 6, we take a deeper look into the cognitive behaviors of the coach. So a model of leadership we have is this meditational model of leadership involves relations among athletic situations, coaching behaviors, athletes encoding, so just their makeup. I've talked a little bit about the biopsychosocial model that makes up all of us, which is a theory directly from psychology, but this encoding would relate to that. And recall of the coaching behaviors and the athlete's evaluative reactions to the coach. So, of this model, we can see how a coaching's behavior would then translate to the athlete's perception and then their evaluation. And this communication between the athlete and the coach, we can pretty much use this interchangeably with a parent and a child, that the coach may have the best intentions, but of those 5 different leadership variables, right, maybe they used the wrong one. Maybe the kiddo's not old enough. Maybe the athlete doesn't respond the best to that one. So their perception is maybe not going to be as positive as the coach wanted. And then if it's not as positive as what they perceived, then what's the athlete's evaluation going to be? It's probably going to be negative, right? So it looks at the different mechanisms and the individual different variables for the athlete, how these mediate the relationship between leadership behaviors, and we have and its antecedents, which basically just means like the pretense leading up, and the consequences. So, development and evaluation of the coach. So if we have this idea that there is a relationship between if we use the right leadership styles for the athlete, for the right scenario, we're going to get some really positive outcomes. So, what chapter 6 did is they took a look at some coach effectiveness training, and we just call it CET for short. And the goal of this was to take a bunch of coaches into a training, basically like a cognitive behavioral therapy. So they kind of entered therapy, and they got to learn about how to recognize the feelings of their athletes. They got to learn a little bit about like emotional intelligence and how to read a room. And of these, they basically developed 5 principles that they wanted the coaches to then take and use on their athletes. After they used those 5 principles, I cannot remember for how long it was. I believe it was a fair amount of time, somewhere around 2 months. They came back and they individually interviewed the kiddos, and they found some pretty awesome results of using this CET training. And what these principles make up are the coaches are urged to focus on the athlete effort and enjoyment over stats and winning. Positive approaches to coaching, so a more positive reinforcement. Establish norms that emphasize athletes' obligations to support one another. So we're seeing some similarities, right, from chapter 5. We're having a social support circle. Have athletes set decisions. Sorry, I'm going to awkwardly swallow spit half the time trying to not lisp as I talk. Have athletes set decisions regarding team rules, allowing athletes to achieve team roles and responsibilities, right? They can rise to the occasion, which is great. I'm sure you guys remember, I think most of you guys are middle to upperclassmen for me, that having to present the freshman year was a lot rougher than it was senior year. being able to rise to this new stressor and practice it over and over again, you start to develop a sense of responsibility and maturity with it that doesn't make you nervous anymore. I was nervous the first time I was teaching, and now, just like we work out, do a new workout for the first time, we're super sore. Fast forward 3 months, we don't even feel it anymore. We can develop. And then coaches should become more aware of their own behavior and its consequences. And I think that one is huge too. It shows that the coaches have to be aware of what they say and what they do and how they act. Just because they had the intentions or their goal was to translate a certain message. We talked about perception, right? The athlete's perception and evaluation. That doesn't mean the athlete's going to perceive it the way you were thinking it. I'm sure you guys can kind of make a connection, right, between relationships. You, with your significant other, are having a disagreement or an argument, and you believe that you're not being aggressive, or you believe what you said was not offensive, but they took it that way. So now you have this weird situation, right, between that wasn't your intentions, but are you self-aware of your own actions, and were you sassy or say something hurtful? Or the opposite. You're aware of your behavior, so you feel confident in the way you're acting. These are huge. Of this, in coaching the children, no surprise, positive reinforcement, all these great things, the kiddos performed better. They liked their coaches more with these 5 principles. And teammates, well, here's a big typo. When coaches engaged in high levels of positive reinforcement, they even liked their teammates better. That is what I actually meant to say. Apologies. So, in engaging in these positive reinforcements, the kiddos, when they were interviewed, they even reported liking their sport more, their teammates more, and the coach more. In my terrible grammar and not checking this, that's what I meant. If you guys have the book, you can check figure 6.2. If you don't, I kind of did a crop photo for you guys, but we can just see a relationship here, right? So there at the bottom, we have our athlete self-esteem low to high. Beside it, we have mean attitude toward coach. And as the mean goes up, the high supportiveness towards the top starts to raise. We can see we start to get into that more moderate and high self-esteem. Interesting stuff. So some examples of CET. The coach is emphasizing positive outcomes if the athlete performs correctly rather than focusing on the negative. Coaches are instructed to say we're in this together to develop support. Coaches self-monitoring their behavior by observing and recording. It's crazy how if you just pause for a second before we respond, how much better you do at a more appropriate answer or response. Coaches were entered into a cognitive behavioral therapy, I said this earlier, and then the kiddos were interviewed. In assessing the effects of the program, kiddos were interviewed and they found a significant increase in self-esteem. It would make sense, right? All this stuff we talked about in chapter 5 with the social support, the positive reinforcement, rising to the occasion, giving them responsibility, a little bit of autocratic behavior mixing with democratic behavior. It's really interesting. What I like about this chapter that relates to psychology, if any of you guys have kiddos or eventually will have kiddos, the positive reinforcement is huge for the age group that you have. I read a book that was called How to Talk to Kids So Kids Will Listen, and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. And it looks at the neuroscience of children's brains that somewhere around 7 years of age is when they start to get the ability to critically think. And before that, they got none of that. And so a great example that I remember from the book was we're all in the car, we're on the highway, and your kiddo drops his toy in the back seat and is asking for it. You can't really get it because you're on the highway. So you try to tell them that, like, hey, we're going really fast, we can't do that. If the child is around 7 and under, they don't have the critical thinking skills to see how dangerous that is. And so it talks about igniting their imagination. Like, oh man, Clark, wouldn't it be cool if we had a robot come down from the car and pick up the toy and give it to you? And gets their imagination going. And then you don't have to bang your head against the wall about them not understanding the dangers of a car being on the highway. With that and these CET outcomes, what do you guys think about these same principles for teenagers and adults? Do you think there's a benefit to negative reinforcement as they get older? Would you say that maybe if we did the study with teenagers and older adults, that we would get similar results, that everyone likes positive reinforcement? Take a second. I want you guys to think about it. So, of the practical implications of this chapter is that cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, going to therapy, works. The highest success rate of the athlete depends on the athlete's own opinion on how they want to be led, how they respond to instruction, how the coach chooses to lead, and finally the leadership style that is actually needed for the situation. And I spoke on this previously, but that kind of that third party outlook, that view, if we use like a child for an example, and we decide to do a gentle parenting style for a really extreme situation. So our kiddo hit another kiddo. For this particular moment, a passive, kinder leadership style may not be appropriate, right? Maybe since we had a harsher action that's wrong, we need to have a harsher discipline. Our tone needs to be stricter. Our punishment needs to be greater to instill a lesson. And that's kind of what this is talking about. If you guys, we talked about relationships, right? Where you had to perceive how your coach felt about you, and then how you actually knew how you felt about your coach. This is similar. The coach perceives the message they're trying to get across, but they don't know the athlete. Maybe the athlete doesn't care about a social circle. Maybe you guys don't care. Maybe you just need to hear the positive reinforcement. You don't need to be given extra responsibility or be put in a group to lead. You just need to be told you're proud of you and you will try your hardest. So this is kind of what they are getting at. So what I want from you guys, but can I have this journal, is I'm going to make a post where you guys are going to tell me your definition of leadership. What is your definition of leadership? And I would prefer this not to be just a sentence. Let's try to make this a paragraph. Try to, if you need to, like Caleb, I don't really know how to stretch this out. You're more than welcome to provide an example. Kind of the thing about like a picture's 1,000 words. An example can tell me and the other students a lot about, what you think. And then with that, I want you to think of a positive and negative component of democratic behavior and autocratic behavior, right? So kind of the democracy, everyone's involved, get some autonomy, and then we have the autocratic, the authoritarian. You're kind of taking control. And I want you to provide me an example or examples to back up your statement. What is a positive and negative component of using democratic behavior? You're more than welcome to use a situation to back up your claim. And then a positive, negative for autocratic, okay? I will, in the assignment post, say all this and list the length I would like, but after answering both of these for me and responding to 2 of your classmates, that will be for full credit. And I know it's an online class, and replying to discussion posts isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but to try to get some amount of communication between you guys, it's like the best we got. So when you're responding, do your best to try to provide something meaningful to the conversation. I would love to see questions. I would love to see that in your response, proposing a question, food for thought. That would be great. Well, I will get a bunch more uploaded for you guys. We have a little bit of catching up to do, and a lot of that is my fault, and I apologize. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend, and if you guys need anything, feel free to email me. Bye-bye.